Jim the Ape Want Proof. Hello again, humans. It is I, Jim the Ape, and I know I haven't made a video in a long time, and that's for a few reasons. Part of it was a 2-week vacation, the kind from which one usually says they need a vacation because it involved travel and a lot of walking. And then, after I got back home from that, my work schedule hit the ground running, so I got really busy with that, and still am. Not to mention, I don't make any money from YouTube or Patreon, so I have no financial incentive to make videos anymore. And the third and final of the major reasons why I haven't done a video in a while is just apathy. Apparently it's common among YouTubers of my ilk, but I just haven't felt the passion, the rage at stupidity, or the creative inspiration to make videos in a really long time. So I will be attempting to move my channel in a direction where I feel I legitimately can make videos about whatever I truly want to make videos about. I'm branching out, so to speak. So in that spirit, I decided to delve back into the topic of religion, much like the amazing atheist TJ Kirk has recently done. I know, how original of me, but if you're gonna copy someone, copy the best, and he is one of the best in my opinion. So today I'm going to be responding to a video that he already made a response video to, but the clips of it he showed in his video intellectually pissed me off. And I'm a fucking retard, so that's saying something. These are questions that no atheist can answer. So apparently I'm setting myself up for failure with this impossible task, but I figure I'll give it a try anyway. Let's get started, shall we?
What are the questions that no atheist will be able to answer? A. How did existence emerge out of no space and no time?
Who said it did? Look, I'm no scientist, but even I know that there are more possibilities than just the entire universe came into existence from nothing, or God done did it. A God who, by the way, you probably believe came into existence from absolutely nothing. So all you're doing is switching one concept of everything coming from nothing for a much less plausible one. Now, I don't have the time nor the qualifications to get into the origins of the universe. The short answer is, we don't know. Or at least, we don't fully understand it yet. But if you want to know more about how the universe could have come from nothing, I hear Lawrence Krauss has written some works on the subject. I haven't read it, to be honest with you, because I'm not much of a reader, but you might want to check that out, since there's a good chance he would be able to answer your first question far better than I just did.
How can an atheist assume that his atheism is valid when the moment of the start of existence is a stark proof on the creativity of the Creator and his ability to originate existence?
Okay, most of that question is you jumping to conclusions about your own beliefs being true because the universe had to start somewhere, which doesn't even come close to proving half of the shit you just assumed in that sentence, i.e. that there is a creator, that said creator has a gender, and said gender is male and not a Tumblr feminist made up one, that it takes a sentient being with creativity to make things exist, etc. But I'm sure I'll get a chance to expand on that later in the video. What I want to focus on now is the first part of the question. How can an atheist assume that his atheism is valid? ... My atheism, that is to say my lack of belief in any gods, is valid because I have seen no evidence that proves the existence of any gods. People have claimed that gods exist for most of human history. So many gods, in fact, that most of them have been relegated to either the garbage disposal of history by being completely forgotten about, or being classified as mythology because no living person honestly believes in them anymore. I see no reason why this trend shouldn't be logically extrapolated to your God as well, although I fear it might not actually happen that way since religion is the safety blanket of the fearfully mortal masses. I'm just saying I find your God to be equally ridiculous to believe in as Zeus, Odin, Amun-Ra, or the fucking flying spaghetti monster. In summary, my rejection of your claim that a God exists is valid because you have thus far failed your burden of proof to verify said claim.
B. How did no life transform into life?
That's Abiogenesis. It's not exactly the same thing as atheism, but then again, neither is the origin of the universe. Whatever, I get it. You're asking how an atheist believes life first began if your make-believe magic bullshit don't reel. And once again, the answer is we don't fully understand it yet, but we have some ideas. One possibility is that life on Earth began from other life forms planting the seeds of life here and then leaving. So basically the opening scene from Prometheus. That theory is called panspermia. I don't really think that that's what happened, but it's one alternate hypothesis. I figured I'd give you an entertaining one first before we move on with the video and you give me a chance to talk about the most plausible explanation.
How did matter mutate from lifelessness into living cell?
You know, you just made me think of something. What is life anyway? I mean, obviously biological organisms can be said to be alive if all of their body's functions are running normally, but plants are also living organisms, and that includes trees. I don't want to get too mind-bendingly philosophical on you, but just consider the possibility that your perception of life and non-life being two distinctly separate states of being may be somewhat inaccurate. I prefer to think of it as potential energy and kinetic energy. Think of it this way. When your body dies and goes into the ground, does it not decompose and release its energy back into the earth from whence it came? How could it do that if it was just some completely inanimate object of pure matter? And yet, it wasn't living at that point, right? All I'm trying to say is that life and non-life is not such a black and white, one or the other kind of concept.
With all our techniques and advancements, we cannot, till this very moment, originate the simplest form of life. So how can we explain the origination of life in the dead matter?
Just because we can't technologically do something doesn't mean that it hasn't happened in nature already. It's incredibly arrogant to think that the human species can do everything that is even possible to do. And that's coming from a gorilla who is clearly the superior species here. But here's the funny thing. Humans kind of already did almost exactly that thing you just said you couldn't. It's an often cited example, but the Miller-Urey experiment was a proof of concept that under certain conditions, it is possible for certain elements to combine in such a way that generates simple amino acids, which are the basic building blocks of life. Granted, it didn't exactly replicate the conditions of early Earth because, well, the specifics of those conditions are unknown, but it proved that such a thing was possible. Hence, it stands as an example of, as the self-explanatory term clearly states, a proof of concept.
Wouldn't we have been at least able to originate a form of life that supersedes the one that originated in the dead matter by at least 1,000,000 times?
Human arrogance. Is there anything more charming?
C. How can the atheist argue against the annihilation of all mankind?
I can't. Thanos was right.
What is the rational, substantial, and scientific evidence an atheist can present to prove that annihilation of all mankind is a mistake?
Well, objectively, there is none. But to get into a more serious answer to your question, there is such a thing as subjective value. Humans, as a social species, rely on what I would call intersubjective values, meaning that while they may technically be subjective opinions, most people in a given culture or subgroup agree on them and therefore abide by them with each other, for the most part. As such, while there may be no objective reason not to destroy all mankind, and maybe a few objective reasons why that might actually be a good idea, since humans overpopulate and destroy the environments they live in, it is ultimately decided by humanity that it prefers to continue existing rather than be wiped from the face of the planet, so most people are opposed to the latter and therefore try to make the former happen instead.
The material world knows no right and wrong.
And yet somehow your beliefs about the material world are wrong.
So annihilation of mankind must be equal to keeping them alive from their perspective.
See, this is where you've gone wrong. You've conflated objective material fact with subjective moral opinion as though they're the same thing, and they're not. Objectively speaking, there is no reason not to destroy humanity and an argument to be made for it. That's true. However, from the subjective perspective of pretty much every human being on the planet, including atheists, that would be a bad thing because, you know, that would include them, and most people don't literally want to die. I have met a few who have fantasized about death as a release from the stress of their daily lives, but that's a very different story.
D. Atheism assumes that human beings are just animals.
Because they are.
Who came into existence after a long and slow sequence of evolution from meaner beings.
Because they did. Although I'm not sure what you mean by meaner beings, you fucking speciesist.
So what if a higher being came into existence? will it have the right to put us all in cages and use us as lab rats?
I have a problem with the term higher being, because, well, by what metric would it be considered higher? That just seems like subjective bullshit to me. But if another species, say gorillas, rose up and put all of you filthy humans in cages, it wouldn't be because we have the right to. Rights are basically just things that a society allows members of it to do. It's just a concept with nothing objective backing it up. Not to mention, rights can be taken away or added at any time. But the superior species, in this example gorillas, would put you humans in cages because it has the ability and desire to do so, and there isn't anything you can do to stop it. God knows you humans do the same thing to us already.
The Darwinist answer that we derive from matter is yes. So, what's the purpose from protecting mankind or providing them with meaning or purpose when it comes to atheism?
Okay, first of all, I don't fully understand the question because it's worded in such a weird way. But secondly, the highly subjective concepts of meaning and purpose are absolutely irrelevant when it comes to discerning what is true and what isn't. Oftentimes, the truth sucks and isn't very comforting, while the things that are comforting turn out to be safety blankets woven from pure bullshit. And finally, while atheism itself is merely the lack of belief in any gods and therefore makes no statement about the meaning of life, many atheists have found their own personal subjective meaning and purpose in life. In fact, the aforementioned amazing atheist T.J. Kirk is writing a book about how you can even find freedom in meaninglessness and loose the shackles of this idea that you must find purpose in life. And so far, I've enjoyed the first few passages, which he's released in audio form as videos on his channel, links below. So, contrary to the premise of your question, there can be a kind of beauty and freedom in a meaningless existence, so long as the nihilism is not misapplied or turned into extreme depression.
Atheism here is unable to explain the reality of man.
Dude, what the fuck does that even mean? The reality of man. Are you saying atheists don't think humans exist? Because that's what I took from that.
E. What if, according to evolution, we proved that one race is higher than the other?
Well, despite what Richard Spencer or Ghazi Kodzo might have you think, that's never going to happen. The differences between the ethnicities of the human race are superficial at best.
Will the higher race be entitled to transform the lesser race into used matter?
Again, your phrasing is weird, and I don't know what used matter means. But like I said before, rights are just concepts of what is and is not permissible in a given culture or society. So whether or not that right would be granted depends on your bullshit hypothetical taking place to begin with, and even then, it would be determined by the people and the government at that time. But don't worry, like I said, that's objectively never going to happen.
As we do with the lesser insects or animals? Again, the Darwinist answer is yes.
Well, you human beings do some fucked up shit to insects and other animals, but in your species' defense, that's not all of you. Some of you refuse to harm another living being, even one so small and subjectively insignificant as a fly. And those people should be commended. But I'm not like that, I just squashed the little bastards.
This very argument is enough to obliterate atheism from any mind that utilizes common sense.
Really? Because I've been listening to your arguments and picking them apart one sentence at a time, and I'm still an atheist. Or maybe by utilizes common sense, you mean is gullible enough to believe in my made-up fairy tale bullshit. But in that case, I don't think those minds have any atheism in them to begin with. And just so you know, I hate using the word atheism as if it's some physical object or something that can be possessed, because it's the absence of a belief. It's the rejection of a claim. If anything, it's the opposite of a thing.
Since the only criteria to judge who is better than who is the criterion of God-fearingness, not by color or strength.
To you, maybe, but to me, all of the above criteria are equally fucking meaningless.
F. Atheists argue that morals are relative, meaning can be seen from more than one perspective.
Thanks, Webster, but I already know what the word relative means. And I know you don't like it, but morality is subjective. The good thing is that, like I said before, many moral values are intersubjectively agreed upon, which helps humans coexist in a society.
So, honesty can be better than betrayal, or betrayal can be better in some cases.
That's demonstrably true even while acknowledging the subjectivity of morality. Say you pledge your allegiance to an organization of some kind, and then, while you're allied with them, you discover that they've been doing things that you consider to be harmful and horrific. Or maybe they just started doing those things later. But the point is that then it's not such a bad thing to betray them and fight for what you think is right. I mean, the obvious example that comes to mind here is the Nazis, but it could just as easily be the Empire from Star Wars, or some terrorist organization of some kind, or even some secret science facility conducting illegal experiments. I mean, maybe I watched too much in the way of dramatized works of fiction, but I think you get my point. So let's move on.
Yet, when confronted with their own trials, they claim outright that morality is objective and that things like honesty or betrayal are absolute.
I never claimed that, so I guess that doesn't apply to me.
Because if morals are relative, then immorality makes no sense.
Yes, it fucking does. Because then things are judged as immoral by subjective standards. I swear, like 99% of the arguments religious people make against atheists could be refuted by a healthy and functional understanding of the difference between subjectivity and objectivity. So many of them can't figure out how that basic fucking dichotomy works. It's insane.
Since we will never be able to set a line between morality and immorality.
Objectively? No. Subjectively? Yes, we can. Learn the difference!
This is definitely a clear contradiction. Because if morality was objective and absolute, then this law of morality must have had a lawgiver.
No, no, and fucking no. Clearly you're arguing against atheists who in some way claim that morality is objective. That's not me, but whatever. Now you've made the leap to saying that there is a law of morality, which is not true because, much like rights, laws only exist as concepts within a society. But even if there was such a thing, it would also be, say it with me kids, subjective! Not to mention the fact that people having opinions about morality doesn't even come close to proving that there must have been some magic being in the sky to bestow those opinions onto humanity. Do you have any idea how ridiculous it sounds when you really break down what you just said? Because I'm trying my damnedest to make you understand.
The will of Allah and divine accountability. If morality was relative, then no atheist must complain from immorality or even comprehend its concept.
Again with the weird wording. I'm beginning to think English was not the first language of the person who wrote this. Maybe it was translated. Anyway, yes, atheists can say something is immoral and comprehend the concept of it from a subjective perspective. I feel like I'm just repeating myself at this point.
G. How did the amazing constants of physics emerge?
Easy. They didn't. It's not some magical thing. It just so happens that matter and energy interact in certain ways under certain circumstances and do so in a consistent manner. I know it's an oversimplification and I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination, but is it really so hard to believe that consistency can happen without some sentient being with magic powers willing it to be so?
All of these constants entail very intricate differences that must never vary, even by the slightest or minutest fraction, or the whole universe would collapse.
You don't know that. I mean, the very concept of evolution is based on the fact that organisms adapt to their environment, right? So who's to say that if something changed in how physics works, that the universe and life forms in it wouldn't just adapt to said change?
For instance, the cosmological constant is fine-tuned to 120 decibel places, and if it was 1 decibel more or less, the whole universe would collapse.
Again, you don't know that. But I find the wording fine-tuned to be extremely biased on your part, since we don't know that anything had to be adjusted in any way, much less by a sentient being like how a human tunes a radio to the station they want to listen to. Have you ever considered that the way the universe is, in terms of physics and cosmology, could just be the way it is naturally without the interference of an outside force?
This precision proves that accuracy of a great maker
It doesn't prove shit. If these so-called constants were different, the universe would probably still exist. It would just be a slightly different universe according to said deviation.
Noting that the constants are numerous in physics and all of them are intricately precise.
And the hairs and contours of my ass are numerous and intricately precise. Does that mean my ass is the universe? Yes, I know it's a childish retort, but here's a slightly more mature, albeit less amusing one. Complexity has never been, nor will it ever be proof of fucking magic beings that speak the universe into existence. Complexity can and does emerge naturally.
H. How did the genome emerge within the living cells?
Ask a fucking geneticist, not an average atheist.
A code must require a coder.
Nope.
And this genome designates what each cell will be used for. Doesn't this prove that there is a unique maker dictating very specific codes?
Shit's complicated, therefore God. No, it doesn't fucking prove shit. And do you know why it doesn't prove shit? Because it's not a code in the sense that we know it. It's just fucking chemicals. Adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. They bond together in specific pairs that makes up strands of deoxyribonucleic acid, aka DNA. Your limited human minds need to examine and classify everything by your language, so your kind started referring to these chemicals and their effects like lines of computer code. Even though that's not something that they were predetermined to be before they existed, it was just a classification after the fact. You learn this shit in fucking middle school. How do you not know it as a fully grown adult?
I. Where did morality and values come from when it comes to atheism?
They don't actually objectively exist. They're subjective, but there are plenty of them that people agree on. We've already been over this.
Atheism sees the universe as a tumultuous sea of atoms that makes no sense and have no purpose.
And that prospect scares the living shit out of you, therefore it must not be true. Look around you, dude. The world is a scary place where bad shit happens all the time, and the only people who care if you live or die are you and your friends, family, and people who know you from work. And some of them actively want you dead. You just have to do the best that you can with the life you have. No second chances, no magic candy land in the sky, and no easy answers.
Which was one of the driving motives to immorality and depravity.
In your subjective opinion, that is.
But since morality does exist, then atheism is invalid.
It doesn't, but atheism is valid regardless. As I pointed out earlier in this video, it is only the lack of belief in the existence of any gods, and since no claim of a god's existence has been objectively verified, the rejection of said claim is perfectly valid and logically sound. But thanks for playing.
To sum up our argumentation against atheism, since there is light, then there has to be a source for this light.
Not if the light is imaginary and or metaphorical.
Since there is shade, then there has to be a body causing the shade.
Well, that's technically true. I mean, I have a body and I'm throwing shade at you.
Since there are intricate objects starting from the quarks and ending with the galaxies, then there has to be an originator.
No, you haven't demonstrated that in any way, and like I said before, complexity does not equal magic.
The Quranic argumentation is the strongest ever.
Believe me, I know arguments, and this is the strongest argument. It's fantastic. It's really great.
Do you not see how those who dispute Allah's signs are turned away from the right path? Those who reject the book, and that with which we sent our messengers, shall soon know.
Well, it's a good thing that last part doesn't sound at all like it might be a veiled threat. I mean, Islam is the religion of peace after all.
How then can you turn away? What are your proofs?
Better question, where's the evidence for your magic fairy tale bullshit? And I mean actual tangible evidence, not bullshit sophistry and half-assed philosophical nonsense.
The atheist has nothing but believing in trivialities and impossibilities.
The only one believing in impossibilities here is you, dipshit. And that's pretty much the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed my return and that there will be more videos to come soon and more regularly. If you did enjoy this, please give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. If you didn't, or if you just want to punish me for being away for so long, give it a thumbs down. I don't really care. If you like my content, please make sure you're subscribed and click the bell icon to turn on notifications for that special occasion when I upload a video. You can follow me on Twitter and BitChute. I post my my videos on the latter several hours before YouTube usually. And of course, if you want to give me the incentive to make videos more often, you can support my work on Patreon, because without it, I'm doing all of this out of pure passion and not getting a penny for it. Not that that'll stop me, mind you. It's just that I would appreciate any amount that you could spare, even if it's just $1 a month. Plus, it would give me that feeling of obligation to make content fairly regularly. As always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time. Stay great, apes. What is life anyway? Is anybody really alive anyway? What is life anyway? Is anybody really alive anyway?